Hello and welcome to another special episode of Science on Top. Today is Saturday, the 10th of August, 2013. My name's Ed Brown and I'm joined by Lucas Randall.
Hello, Ed.
And today we're very honoured to be joined by astronomer, podcaster, teacher, horse rider and book lover, Dr. Pamela Gay. Welcome to the show.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me on.
It's our honour and privilege. We've been wanting to have a chat with you for a long time because you've got your fingers in so many very interesting, fascinating pies.
Well, there's a visual.
Let's just hope none of them are blackbird pies that are getting ready to eat the fingers off.
Oh.
Yes, nipping.
And let's hope they are not freshly baked and you're not burning your fingers.
Okay, I think we've run this metaphor to the ground. Let's move on.
Well, let's, I guess, start from the start then. When did you know that you wanted to be an astronomer? Was there a moment that you said, this is for me?
Well, I think I've pretty much always loved astronomy. Some of my earliest memories are of trying to look through a telescope, but there was a disconnect between knowing that I loved it and realizing I was actually capable of it, because there's so much discouragement when you want to be a scientist. There's people saying, oh, you need to find something that doesn't require you to be so smart. You're not that smart. And there's the, oh, that's so hard to get into. You'll never succeed. You hear these things over and over. And it wasn't really until halfway through university that I realized, no, really, I am smart enough to do this, and gave in to my desire, you might say.
It's interesting because you see so many people going into law and things like that, where presumably you just have to be equally as intelligent to do anything well, but there's this pressure against going into science.
Well,
do you think that still exists today?
Yes, and I think part of it is that, well, to be a good lawyer and to be a good scientist, you have to be brilliant. There's so much need for lawyers that even if you're a mediocre lawyer, you can make a living. But in astronomy, there's so few jobs that even the most brilliant among us, there's a certain element of luck in whether or not they're able to keep their jobs.
There's something so terribly sad that we live in a world where we need more lawyers than astronomers.
I know.
It's
I
horrific.
know. There's something so wrong with that, and I think the average university probably employs more lawyers than astronomers, even at the university level, and there isn't a corporation that doesn't at least occasionally hire a lawyer.
Very sad.
Yeah, what a depressing start to the show.
I'm so sorry.
All right, well, given that astronomy is such a broad field, but your specialty is in variable stars, what are they and what do you do?
So variable stars are stars that do just what their name implies. They vary over time. When Keats said he wanted a love as constant as a star, apparently he wanted love as explosive as a supernova. The stars aren't constant, and some of them vary on a very regular basis, either over the course of hours or days as they pulsate like a beating heart.
And what causes that? Is that like they're presumably not getting closer and further away from us? Are they just changing in brightness?
Yeah, it's a stable instability. I know that sounds odd, but it's stars as they age, they change in brightness over time, and they're constantly trying to find this new balancing point between gravity trying to crush the star and the light being generated in the center of the star trying to push it apart. And as they're constantly finding slightly new stable points, sometimes the chemistry changes. And there's this magical point when they enter the instability strip where the chemistry involved in ionizing the atoms in the outer part of the atmosphere. There's this shell of atoms all around the star that, as the star tries to heat up, the energy goes into ionizing the atoms instead of into pushing the star apart. And then as the star tries to collapse back down and heat back up, that energy that went into the ionization, instead of it just forms this wonderful balance where the energy that goes into the ionization gets stored and reused later. And so you have this kicking back and forth between expanding, collapsing, that is held in this perfect balance just by the energy of ionization.
And from what I understand, the rate of variation can be, hugely different as well, can't it? They can, although it's constant typically in each star, you can have some that vary on a rate of hours, others that are years. And there's all these different variables.
And all these different variables that have different variables that control them. The long period variables, the red stars, the Miras, we actually still don't fully understand what it is that keeps those particular stars pulsating. Their atmospheres are thinner than the Earth's atmosphere in some places, and trying to understand what it is that causes such a huge diffuse system, keeps it in motion is hard for us to sort out. And so we're still trying to figure those out. And then on the other side, there's stars that vary on the order of several times an hour to several times a minute. And just trying to understand all the different ways that things can pulsate keeps us busy.
I'm just thinking that must be an incredible light show if you're on an exoplanet orbiting around one of these variable stars. Do we know of any exoplanets around them? I assume it would be a weird thing.
It's actually one of those things that we're not looking for right now on purpose. Yeah. And the issue is that the way that we look for variable stars is we look for slight changes in the brightness of the star that is caused by the planet passing in front of the star. But if you have a star that is having more than slight variations due to its own nature, it makes it suddenly very hard to find that planet. So people who are out looking for planets purposely ignore these variable stars that are often later in their life and doing a whole lot of weird stuff. It's in our own solar system, this is one of the possible futures for our sun. And should it become some sort of a variable star at one or more points in its future, the Earth will already be a crispy critter. We'll have been broiled by the expanding sun when it becomes a red giant star. But you can imagine a solar system that has life on its own version of Europa orbiting a distant gas giant. It would be able to witness this sudden change in how its star behaves. But the thing is, like I said, this occurs late in a star's life. So life has to figure out how to adjust over the course of the star's life.
Wow. Very cool. And so what does your actual research involve then? Are you trying to figure out with the long-term ones what causes that? Or
I for many years was working on short period compared to the many years. The shorter period are our Lari stars, and trying to understand why is it that some of them have very complex behavior and others don't. But I have to admit that in the process of learning how to work with variable stars, I became a database junkie, someone who worked with big data, someone who searched through all the different archives of data that's out there. And those skills are now what I use in citizen science projects. And lately I feel like I'm having an affair with the wrong kind of science, because instead of working on variable stars, I've actually been working on lunar science most recently, where my skills with computers have been being used by people who have skills with craters.
I do like that in your About Me section on your blog, you talk about committing scientific adultery in different fields.
Well, it's how it feels, because you always have that first scientific love, and I've at least temporarily walked away from mine to focus on other areas where I could have a larger impact.
Fair enough. And I think big data is definitely a good field to be in, because that's where a lot of the good science seems to be happening now, where we can get huge volumes of, data and just put it into a computer, crunch it, find out what's going on with really complex things, dark energy and dark matter and all that sort of stuff, and obviously variable stars.
Well,
very cool.
And this is a new problem to have, where we're trying to figure out how to sort through the thousands of data points that we're getting off of different surveys, off of different long-term studies of even single objects. It used to be that if we had 6 data points on something, we counted ourselves lucky. And now there's times where we have 6,000 or 6 million, depending on what the object is. It's changing how we do science to have all of this statistically significant data to be able to deal with for the first time.
I know one of the projects that's recently, they ended up splitting where it was going, the square kilometre array, which was a big deal for us here in Australia, because we bid to host the SKA. It ended up being split between us and South Africa. But there's been articles I've read about that talk about the amount of data it will generate per day. And, the catch cry has been that it'll be more data per day than the entire internet at the moment. It's just boggling amount of information to try and crunch and get something meaningful out of.
And what gets me is how quickly this has come into being. Back in 1952, when Mariner 2 flew past Venus, it had a memory capable of holding 6,000 characters. Now we have spacecraft that are sending back 600 gigabytes. So we're just dying in data right now, and being able to program computers to handle the bulk of it is becoming an important skill.
So are there people who are specialising in that, who are not traditionally considered members of the science community? Like, obviously there's a lot of inroads for programmers and IT people for that particular skill set.
Yes. In fact, I have a team that is a mix of computer programmers and educators here at my university, because we've realized that we're actually dealing with a double-edged problem. On one hand, you need to be able to process big data, and on the other hand, we've realized there's some things computers just aren't quite ready to do, and so we need to educate members of the public. And so here we need to have the people who can communicate and basically turn the public into part of our computer algorithm, and we need the computer people to prepare the data for the public.
I certainly know what you mean in terms of feeling, so passionate about data. I love data as well. My data that I work with is more on the sales sort of side of data, the sales trends and that sort of thing within our business. But I love seeing the elegant ways in which some people can attack a problem. We've got data that's represented and stored in a certain way that you can't get directly from A to B in terms of what you need, but you can sort of take these steps where you sort of build the data set up based on different things that you wouldn't normally think are associated, and then they can draw these incredible conclusions for things, and you think, my God, it's just amazing how they've drawn all that together. It quite excites me.
Yeah,
it can also be a trap, though, that you can get that sort of... you can join two things that aren't related but seem related. Can easily happen, I think, when you get that data.
Correlation is not causation, is the
exactly.
phrase we've all learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And obviously, a problem, no matter whether you're talking about scientific data or business data or anything else. But it's still, I find it incredibly exciting getting some new piece of information that wasn't immediately obvious is very cool.
And this is the other place that there's inroads, is I've seen some amazing artwork in the form of infographics done by people who have the understanding of mathematics and the understanding of, art. And they're finding ways to explain what the data means through amazing visualizations. So as science grows, it's no longer your isolated one or two scientists and their students working in a lab. It's now multidisciplinary team of scientists, of programmers, of artists, of educators, all working together to figure out what does it mean and how do we share this meaning with our peers.
So do you think, sorry, I don't know, I keep barging in, do you think this is maybe a sign of the end of the the individual pioneer who can claim certain discoveries? We're sort of at the point now that there is so much collaboration and so much access to other people's work that obviously it's better for science, but we might not see new heroes anymore.
I think they're going to take a new form, and I think perhaps Elon Musk is an example of this, where it's going to require great leaders who are capable of holding the big picture idea in their head and directing all the different humans to play their parts in much the same way that it used to be a great scientist could hold all the math in their head or could manipulate all of the equipment on their own. Well, now instead of manipulating equations and manipulating equipment, it's going to be manipulating teams of humans who are playing the different roles.
Very good point.
Good answer.
Yeah, very good answer. And I guess that sort of highlights the importance of science communication in a lot of ways as well, because obviously you personally have spent an enormous amount of time chasing money, grants and communicating to others the importance of this project for their outcome. Do you still have that sort of burden in terms of your educational career?
Yeah, chasing money is one of the unfortunate realities. I have to admit the budget that we have for Astrosphere, the company that handles all of our podcasts, all of our outreach, it's been devastated by the economic downturn. Corporations that used to have $1,000 here or there to donate just don't anymore. And so there's this problem where the governments are running low on money because of the economic downturn, so there isn't as much money for science. Companies are devastated by the economic downturn, so they don't have as much money to give, and this leads to small nonprofits like mine just hoping each month that we'll find the money to make payroll, and some months are significantly harder than others, and this month is one that you're hitting on one of those topics of oh my gosh, please don't make me look at my bank account, because it hurts, and I dream of a day when I don't have to beg for the money to educate people. I don't have to beg for the money to do science, but we don't have that day. Instead, it's just getting worse and worse and worse every day.
And funding shortfalls and a lack of funding is not a new concept for science. And I think in here in Australia, there's a mind-blowing statistic that I've heard where scientists here spend a third of their time applying for grants and applying for money. That's a third of their time instead, and 2/3 doing actual research in the science, which is just freaks me out from someone in a private industry to think of that. But you came up with something, a really incredible and novel way to try and raise money. Do you want to tell us about the Hangout-a-thon and how that worked? Because this is just out of the box, breathtakingly awesome.
So to raise money for our citizen science team at SIUE, so we with CosmoQuest, which is the online project that I run, we have two big pieces. One is our citizen science, which is funded through Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, through a variety of different partnerships with NASA and through private contributions. And then our other biggest chunk, and there's many other pieces, our other biggest chunk is our media, which goes through astrosphere.org and produces Hangouts. The Hangout-a-thon was to fund strictly the citizen science piece. And the idea was, let's do an old-fashioned telethon like many of us grew up watching on television, where it used to be they'd raise money for muscular dystrophy research, for cancer research, for a whole variety of different things. And over a holiday weekend, they'd often have a whole slate of different entertainment, and they'd come in between every different performance and say, and this is made possible by donations from people like you, but most people never donate, so it's your turn. And well, we decided to embrace that. We're going to sing for our supper mentality. And Nicole Gallucci and I hosted a 32-hour online hangout-a-thon, a telethon done using the Google Hangout on Air technology. And we had guests that talked science, that talked art, that talked entertainment, all of it tied in with astronomy. And we raised about $24,000 when the dust had settled. And it's a start. That's a couple months of our operating budget for computers and humans and everything else. It's
32 hours of non-stop broadcasting.
Yeah.
Though. That money came at a price.
It did. I think part of me is still sleep deprived from that particular weekend. But
were you awake and doing that for the whole? You couldn't have done it for the whole 32 hours without sleep, did you?
I took 2 1-hour naps, and I think Nicole took 1 2-hour nap. We knew that money is scarce, and we wanted to show that we were willing to sing for our supper. So that's exactly what we did. So, well, we didn't literally sing, but...
Although I'd pay for that. I'd definitely pay for that.
Depending on how big the donation is, I might just...
So have you been... I heard recently you've been doing some audiobook narrating, is that correct?
Yes. So I have a book coming out on Audible that I don't know if I'm allowed to say the title of, so I'm not going to.
Sure. Yep.
But as soon as it comes out, I'll make a big deal about that. And then
a book that you wrote yourself?
No, it's a book written by Don Barrett. But then in addition to that, with 365 Days of Astronomy, I've been doing narration of short stories for that. Now, I have to admit that in order to try and keep my career somewhat Googleable without too great of a confusion, I do audio narration under my married name, which is Pamela Quevelan. And so we've been doing narrations of Creative Commons licensed short stories that we think will get people talking about the science as well as enjoying the fiction.
That's brilliant.
That is very cool. So do you ever see Kyle, your husband? Is he does he have to book time or?
So yeah, the 35 days I just spent in Europe, unfortunately, we were apart for the entire trip.
Oh wow.
But I'm now home, and we do get to see each other when I'm home. And it is hard, but when you're trying to do good things, sometimes you have to make certain sacrifices. And one of mine is I am away a lot. But the being away, in this case, allowed me to go out and train a bunch of European teachers on how to more effectively bring astronomy into their classroom through a myriad of different technologies, and to sit down and work on plans with colleagues on how to use astronomy to help the developing world become more technologically and scientifically literate. And we have great plans. It does have a cost in terms of jet lag. My body's currently going, do you realize what time it is? Because it's completely confused.
Wow.
But
that was something I was going to ask, is how do you find the time to do it all, to have a personal life, to also be an astronomer, to be a teacher and a podcaster, to do all of this stuff? Lucas thinks that you must have Hermione's time turner from Harry Potter, or a TARDIS or something.
Those are both accusations that have been made many different times. So the truth is, at a certain point, you have to work with really good people, and I'm lucky to have an amazing staff. I don't do everything alone. I have Joe and Corey, who are amazing programmers, Nicole Gallucci, who handles outreach and travels almost as much as I do, just not quite as far yet. Then there's my education team, Georgia, Ellen, and Kathy. I have folks running the podcasting back end. Viva runs Herd over Richard and Nate and Preston, and all these different people working together make what I do possible. And Fraser, my co-host with AstronomyCast, steps in as needed when we just need more vision than I can provide while sitting on an airplane somewhere. So all of this is made possible by a group of us supporting one another together. I have an amazing staff.
You're sounding more and more like that Elon Musk type's super leader of people that we were talking about earlier.
Oh, if only I was a billionaire like him.
Well said. Spoken like a true scientist. So you mentioned AstronomyCast then. This has been running for nearly 8 years now. You've done over 300 episodes. How did it all happen? How did this start?
I think Phil Plate's to blame.
Isn't he for everything?
I use that sentence several times a week.
So in all seriousness, I'd been working on the Slacker Astronomy podcast for a long time, but for a variety of different personal reasons, ranging from me getting married and moving cross country to Aaron starting graduate school and a myriad of other things, that show was undergoing a massive formatting change, and I needed to work on something that was less likely to offend conservative students at my university. And I asked Phil if he wanted to start a podcast with me. And he said, oh my, no, I'm too busy. And about the same time, Fraser asked Phil the same question. And Phil sort of said, let me introduce the two of you. And so Phil introduced Fraser and I, and we launched our first episode Labor Day weekend right after Pluto had its planethood stripped away, and we've been going strong ever since.
And that was your first episode, Pluto's Identity Crisis. So I have to ask, where do you sit on the Pluto issue? And this is your personal opinion, not your scientific opinion.
So this is not my analogy, but it's one that I love. The way I once heard it explained is, imagine that you have these aliens bent on organizing the universe that come flying into our solar system with a bunch of planetary-sized Rubbermaid containers. They're going to stick all of the rocky worlds in a bin. They're going to stick the gas and ice giants in a bin. They're going to be left over with all these rocky, non-spherical things like potato-shaped asteroids and the Trojans out near Jupiter. All of those are going to go in a bin. And then you're going to be left with all of the chunks of ice. And Pluto's just another chunk of ice when you look at it from a physical perspective. And I think that our definition of planet is kind of screwed up at the moment, because if Earth were at Pluto's orbit, it wouldn't act like a planet either. But at the same time, I think there's a lot to be said about trying to come up with a geological definition where maybe objects that act like comets when they're close to the sun, which is exactly what Pluto would do, maybe coming up with a non-planetary name for them makes perfect sense.
I guess astronomy is one of those weird. Astronomy is one of those weird areas of science that because it's so old, like, having grown, its roots back in astrology and predicting things and how important it was for crops and that sort of stuff. It's been influenced by popular culture from those days. So a lot of these names of things and planets and moons and all that sort of stuff were not really scientific as such. Not in the same way that perhaps, if you look at botany, which is, in terms of the classification of different species of plants and that sort of thing, very, the Greek names for everything and the Latin names and so forth, it's all very structured and as you say, these little boxes for different types of things. Astronomy is kind of a mismatch, certainly with the things we knew about for a long time.
And astronomy does have a habit of realizing after 100 years or so, oh, we screwed up. So originally you saw that galaxies were considered just another form of nebula, just like a planetary nebula, just like a star-forming region. And it was actually only in the 1900s that they had great debates arguing over, well, are these really just small island universes that are separate from our own Milky Way? And the answer was yes. So then suddenly we had to come up with, well, what's a galaxy? And there's still the occasional argument over small things like dwarf galaxies versus globular clusters. But I think everyone's pretty much figured out the answers to those arguments. But then when it comes to looking at our own solar system, Pluto's story isn't new. When Ceres was first found, it was called a planet as well. It's the largest of the asteroids. It's spherical, just like Pluto's spherical, because it's large enough that its mass pulls it into a sphere. But as telescopes started peering at the region of the sky around Ceres and in the band of the zodiac ever more closely, more and more of these, nearby rocks started to become apparent, and it quickly was realized that Ceres isn't an isolated planet, but just one of many rocks in space, and so it became an asteroid. Yeah. Pluto, it got lucky. There was a dedicated search for a planet in its region of the sky, and when it was found, many people were like, this thing isn't as big as it needs to be. But there was a lot of political pressure to call it a planet, and there's still a lot of political pressure to call it a planet. But just like Ceres, its demotion seems to have been a natural outcome of its reality.
I keep coming back to Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, get over it.
And immediately now I think of Pamela shushing Neil deGrasse Tyson on stage.
Yes.
Which was just one of my favourite moments, I got to say.
Well, he had a sarcastic comment and I had a scientific point, and my scientific point was going to win out that day, and it did.
It absolutely did.
So getting back to AstronomyCast, I mean, you've tackled everything from string theory to plate tectonics, the shape of the universe, climate change. How do you master so many diverse and complicated subjects every week?
I'm not allowed to stop learning, which is kind of an awesome thing.
No one ever should be.
Right, but a lot of people can get away with, I know enough about my profession. I know enough about pretty much everything, that instead of focusing on learning new science, new history, they focus on learning the latest gossip about the Hollywood stars or, whatever. And instead of having that much spare time for video games, I find myself instead constantly learning what's new in the land of astronomy. And sometimes we end up using AstronomyCast as an excuse for me to read up on something that otherwise I might not be able to justify the time to read about.
I somewhat know the feeling, actually. Because, my interest is, very much came from the astronomy angle, and when Ed started our podcast, I suddenly found myself reading stories that I normally wouldn't digest. I wouldn't have to, and I've loved it. I've loved the fact that it's opened my eyes up to the breadth of wonder that is the scientific endeavor. It's awesome.
Everyone should do a podcast.
Yes.
I'm not sure everyone should do a podcast, but I think everyone should have that one thing that, we used to have book clubs. We used to have reading groups, all these different ideas that people got together to study. Even Bible studies were based on learning more. If people could go back to those days of getting together with friends to challenge one another to learn more and do more, that's really what our society needs.
I guess there is a little bit of that. I mean, you see a lot of skeptics in the pub and things like that arising, sort of grassroots, people just organising for the sake of organising and discussing things and having talks. You get the TEDx sort of side of things as well. But you're right, there's definitely a dearth of that, and it's not happening as much as it should.
And it's not as much a part of the culture anymore. If you think back to when people had to do everything in teams, from getting together to have knitting circles and quilting clubs to barn raisings, and it was the standard culture of knowing your neighbor and working with your neighbor on various things. And it's possible now to be a perfectly good member of society without joining anything or knowing if you live next door to an old man or a young woman. It's through challenging one another that we're challenged to learn. And I think we need more community and more learning within communities.
Is this, do you, well, I certainly wonder if this very thing is partially to blame for the switch in priorities. I mean, economic downturns have happened before, but we've got, I've certainly been very aware of the great, pullback in spending on education, not just in STEM, but in lots of areas of education. Where in our country, back in the 70s, early 80s, you could pursue an undergraduate degree and a postgraduate degree, and you didn't have to pay anything. It was on the state. Nowadays, it's all user pays, and they're constantly, the courses that I've just been aware of from friends telling me, courses that have been cancelled, that they're even in the middle of doing, just because there aren't enough people, able to cough up and pay for them. It's just, it's really quite jarring for us, because it's, we're a fairly new country, and we've never really, we seem to have gone backwards really, really quickly, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, the funding for university education is facing a twofold problem. On one hand, the democratization of education has actually been somewhat devastating. It used to be that it was extraordinarily difficult to get into university, and people who didn't go to college were still proud of their careers, proud of the jobs that they had, because it was generally understood university isn't for everyone. And with the limited number of people going, that of course brought costs down as well. If your universities in any given nation are only trying to pass 10-15% of your population through their doors, that becomes tractable. And it also means that you can have very high entrance standards, so that everyone coming in perhaps has calculus, everyone coming in perhaps has taken the same high school background science courses. Well, over the years, it's slowly evolved so that now we're looking at as much as 30% of a nation's population attempting college. And once you start getting to those higher percentages, you have student preparation isn't as good. So you have to invest more money in offering remedial courses at university. Suddenly your class sizes go up. So you need different infrastructure. Universities, the costs don't scale linearly with the number of students. And so as we've increased the percentage of students who are starting out university, it's changed how we have to fund it, and it's made it so that nations can no longer afford to educate their populations for free. The other thing that we're facing, at least here in the United States, is so much money is going to defense. So much money is going to trying to take care of our elderly, which far outnumber our youth, that it's becoming harder and harder to fund things like education. And it's the problem that you can't abandon your elderly, but the money has to come from somewhere to take care of them, and everything else is getting its budgets cut. And I don't advise the whole multiple wars at one time thing for any nation.
No, keep one at a time is much better.
I'd actually even argue for 0 at a time now and then would be good
even
to try.
One's too many. Yeah. But speaking of education, I mean, with CosmoQuest, you're actually doing courses, and you're also doing online courses with Swinburne University here in Australia. But tell us about the CosmoQuest courses that you do.
So unlike Swinburne, which is a fully accredited university, with CosmoQuest, we're recognizing that lots of people want an in-depth understanding of a variety of topics, whether it be how to get stunning images and process them. This is a course Emily Lakdawala is going to be teaching on how to get images from the planetary data system at NASA. I'm going to be teaching a course starting on Monday, August 12th, rather, about, well, why is it that we know the Big Bang happened? So we have these very narrow focused classes we have courses just on your standard, what is a star, what is a galaxy, that are spread out over multiple weeks. And we invite people in, no preparation expected beyond high school math and physics. And we work to teach people these general concepts. These classes aren't free. But we're keeping class sizes down. We only open our classes up to 8 people at a time. And this means that you really are getting a small, intimate class experience where when you have questions, your question doesn't get lost among the 5,000 colleagues in the class with you.
It's a brilliant idea. I think this is one of yet another ways that the internet is breaking down boundaries and making things like education. I mean, as you say, it's not accredited, but who cares? It's still a way of learning stuff, and it's available to pretty much anyone. It's also like the Khan Academy and a number of other sort of places that are opening up this type of thing. It's brilliant.
And
thank you.
You're welcome. Our goal was basically, I can go out and take horseback riding lessons or dance lessons or Pilates lessons. Why is it I can't take astronomy lessons for fun? We are offering we actually set the price based on how much I would pay to take yoga here. We set the price based on that, and this is how people can take astronomy for fun online.
And so what is the price then? Oh, you weren't prepared for that.
I'm having one of these moments of, oh no, I don't remember exactly. It's around $240 for a 4-week class. I want to say it's around $30 an hour is what it works out to.
That's actually exceptionally good value considering the small class size that you're getting. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that was our goal. People still find it difficult at times, but this is where we do offer all of our Google Hangouts on air for free, so that when we have things that we can give away, we do give them away.
I must say those Hangouts are a lot of fun. You kind of it takes the podcast to a whole new level because not only have you got a group of people who are talking, but just the interactivity of it and the fact that there is the chat window and so forth. You feel like you're there. You feel like you're a part of it, and it's a lot of fun.
And you get to watch our expressions when things go terribly right or terribly wrong. This is one of the things that I'm loving. The Google Hangout on Air, it's basically a live discussion streamed out to YouTube where you can get up to 10 different computers online, so however many people are at each computer. And we've done virtual star parties this way, and getting to watch Nicole Gallucci suddenly realize, oh, that's where the pattern is in the stars. There's been a few times where I haven't even realized I'm talking with my hands, and Fraser points it out, and we have a blast, and you get to see our expressions as we're explaining things.
Your microphone is a very, very well used prop. For a stand-in for a star or a planet or an atom.
Yes, no, it's true. It's true. I do abuse whatever comes in handy, and that is often the top of my microphone.
All right. I guess let's move into a more sort of a personal note. You're kind of a celebrity in many ways, but more importantly, you're a huge inspiration to a lot of people. I know you kind of are responsible for awakening Lucas's scientific curiosity, reawakening, when he found AstronomyCast. Who inspires you?
Oh wow, that's complicated. I think it's a variety of small experiences all adding up. This past week, I was at a meeting of Global Hands-On Universe, and there was Chuck and Bonnie, who do telescopes for Tanzania. It's a husband and wife couple who are working to go to Tanzania and spread astronomy through small telescopes. And they recognize that by getting people learning science, they can help develop that nation. And that's just amazing to me. There's Philippe, who does Galileo Mobile. It's a program where basically he will go to some random, it's not actually random, some planned ahead of time nation that may not have general access to good science education, get a vehicle, and then drive around the nation, scooping up local science teachers as he goes and teaching astronomy in villages. He's traveled throughout India. He's traveled up and down South America. And he started doing this when he was in his late 20s. And just meeting all of these amazing individuals. There's Rosa Doran, who ran the European Global Galileo Teacher Training Program and has helped train thousands and thousands of teachers in how to use astronomy in their classrooms. Seeing all of these people who are volunteering their time, or basically the money they earn all gets turned around into either the food they eat or the programs they run without anything extra. Watching these people essentially take all but a vow of poverty in order to do astronomy. It's something I think my husband wishes I would emulate less, but I find it truly inspiring.
That was an amazing answer. I knew I'd get something different because I think I've heard you say that you didn't get Carl Sagan's cosmos like a lot of people, a lot of astronomers would say, oh, that's where I got my inspiration from. But I wasn't expecting that. That was awesome.
I have to admit, I'm guilty of not seeing Cosmos until I was already partway through graduate school, just because I didn't get it on television where I was growing up. And so I'd already been hooked on astronomy by the time I saw it.
I guess for me, the final thing is I'd like to ask you a favour, if you wouldn't mind giving your team a shout out and a thank you, because obviously you're very much at the front and you get a lot of the thanks and people adoring you and so forth. But it's so visible and so obvious what the other people do. And Nicole seems to be on everything now. She's and I can see that Noisy Astronomer isn't just a sort of a nod at her radio astronomy skill set.
No, she's a girl from Staten Island. She's loud.
She is loud, but yeah, if you can just pass on to them that it is appreciated and people do realise. Or at least we do that the amazing things that they're doing and the amazing things that they're attributing and adding for the good of everybody. It's awesome.
I will definitely pass that along. I couldn't do what I do if I didn't trust my team the way I do. They all of them have at more than one point had to pull an all-nighter because something broke and it needed fixed, or there was a scientist who needed something for a paper and it needed to just get done. And from Courtney helping to run the forums to Ray Sanders teaching classes, I mean, these are the people I didn't name earlier. There's just so many people within CosmoQuest. All of our partners at other institutions, from Youngstown State University to NASA missions to all the educational programs we work with. We are a community, and I love everyone.
It would actually be a great infographic. You mentioned before about the infographics and how powerful they are with getting those, getting certain messages across that typically just live in data. But seeing an infographic of all the people connected to CosmoQuest would be pretty cool. Like in how they're connected. I'm not asking you to do it. You've got enough to do. I think I'd love to see that.
I did start trying to put together an org chart, and it very quickly became very intimidating.
Yeah. I remember the one you did, which was based on influence of, I think it was about Twitter. It was a fair while ago. Do you remember the one I'm talking about?
I do.
It was very cool just seeing, and I hadn't seen anything like that. I've since seen quite a few that other people have done, but yours was the first. And just amazing to see the influence that people have on social media and how it flows. It was quite eye-opening. That's about all I have for now.
Well, I think we started off, we got quite depressing at the very beginning, but we've lifted it up towards the end talking about the amazing work you do and the amazing people that you work with. So thank you very much for that. Pamela, is there anything you wanted to plug or talk about before we finish up?
All I can really say is go do science, and you can do science at CosmoQuest.org. We're working to map out our solar system, literally creating maps of scientifically interesting features on the Moon, Mercury, and Vesta, with more worlds to come. And if you don't have time to do science, help us build the solar system out for other people to explore, and consider donating at cosmoquest.org/donate. I'm asking you to either do or give. I'll take either.
Excellent.
Dr. Pamela Gay, it's been wonderful to chat with you today. Thank you so much for talking to us in the early hours of a Saturday morning.
It's been wonderful, and thank you for dealing with my slow brain as I deal with both jet lag and midnight in America.
Oh, this is slow. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say thank you for bringing it down to Lucas's level, but Pamela blogs at starstrider with a y.com, and we'll have a link to that and all the many other projects that you've got going on at scienceontop.com. Thanks for listening to this special episode of Science on Top.